The sound of waves crashing beyond the mansion's cliffs did little to calm Ethan Wallace's restless heart. 2 years had passed since his wife's sudden death, yet the empty chair at the dinner table still felt like a wound that refused to heal. Now, with his daughter Lily growing older, he knew she needed more than just a father. She needed a mother's presence. So Ethan made a decision that would surprise everyone in his social circle. He announced that 5 of the most eligible, high-class women in the city would be invited to spend a week at his sprawling coastal estate. The purpose was clear. He wanted to see if one of them could become the perfect stepmother for Lily. But there was someone already in Lily's life who filled that role in ways none of these women could understand. Grace Bennett had been the mansion's cleaning lady for nearly 3 years. She wasn't glamorous, didn't attend charity galas, and had never stepped into the kind of circles Ethan's guests moved in. Yet she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her warm smile was the first thing Lily saw every morning, and her soft voice was the one that read fairy tales each night. She was the one who remembered which sweater Lily liked when it rained, who could coax her into eating breakfast on difficult days, and who never once made the child feel like a burden. The week began with the grand arrival of Ethan's guests. First came Veronica Chase, a high-profile attorney whose designer heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. She looked around the entryway as if appraising it for flaws, her sharp eyes already scanning the people present. Behind her was Dr. Camilla Rhodes, a well-known cardiologist with a smile so polished it almost felt rehearsed. She greeted Ethan with practiced warmth, but her gaze slid right past Grace without acknowledgement. Next, Isabella Monroe, a real estate mogul with the kind of confidence that filled the room before she spoke. Her diamond necklace caught the sunlight, streaming through the skylight, almost blinding in its brilliance. Then came Claudia Whitmore, a socialite whose photos were splashed across society pages weekly. She carried herself like royalty, and her faint smirk seemed to question why she even needed to be there. Finally, Evelyn Crane, a celebrated architect, stepped in with a look that suggested she was already redesigning the place in her head. Lily, dressed in her favorite pale blue dress, greeted them politely. She stood close to Grace's side, her small hand tucked into the older woman's. The subtle narrowing of a few eyes did not go unnoticed. The tension began almost immediately. Over tea in the sunroom, Veronica made an offhand remark about how nice it must be for staff to live vicariously through their employers' luxuries. Isabella asked Grace if she had ever been to a real art gallery, and then chuckled as if the answer was obvious. Evelyn's compliments to Lily came with the quiet suggestion that good manners were rare in children raised by staff. Grace responded the only way she knew how, with patience. She poured tea without missing a beat, offered polite replies, and never let the sting of their words reach Lily. If the women expected her to lash out or appear rattled, they were disappointed. Still, the unspoken lines were drawn. Grace could feel it in the way conversations shifted when she entered a room, in the deliberate way the women complimented one another's clothes but never hers, in the sudden silences when Lily laughed with her. That night, as the moonlight spilled across the polished floors, Ethan stood by his study window and watched Grace help Lily into bed. The gentle care in her movements, the way Lily's eyes lit up, the quiet happiness between them. It was something no amount of wealth could buy. Ethan didn't yet know that the coming week would push every hidden tension to the surface, and that the woman who had always been quietly in the background might just be the one who changed everything. By the second morning, the lines between polite civility and open hostility had blurred. The 5 women treated Grace as though she were invisible when it suited them, and as a target when it did not. During breakfast on the terrace, Claudia suggested a shopping trip into the city for the ladies. Grace was not invited. When Lily asked if Grace could come, Veronica quickly interjected. She probably has laundry to do, her tone dripping with false concern. Later, in the rose garden, Isabella whispered loudly enough for Grace to hear. Some people just do not understand refinement. Evelyn smirked in agreement, glancing at Grace's plain dress as if it were a personal offense. The remarks grew sharper in front of Lily. Dr. Camilla once told the child, "You will learn more about the world once you are around better influences," while giving Grace a thin smile. The words hung in the air like a cold wind, making Lily's small fingers clutch Grace's hand tighter. It was not just words. There were little sabotages that seemed harmless to anyone not paying attention. Grace's cleaning supplies were moved to different cupboards, her laundry baskets mysteriously overturned, her fresh flowers in Lily's room replaced with plastic ones. None of these things stopped her work, but the intention behind them was unmistakable. The turning point came on the fourth day. Lily's cherished teddy bear, a worn, soft toy her late mother had given her, went missing. The mansion was searched from top to bottom, every room turned inside out. Lily's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling as she asked Grace if she had seen it. They were all in the grand hallway when Veronica announced, "I think we should check everywhere, even the staff areas." Her gaze slid deliberately toward Grace. Moments later, Isabella returned holding the teddy bear. "Found it," she said lightly, "in the supply closet." The air grew thick with implication. Lily's face twisted with confusion. "Grace, why would it be in there?" Before Grace could speak, Claudia added with mock sympathy, "Sometimes people keep things they should not. It is best to remember your place." All eyes turned to her, waiting for outrage or denial. But Grace simply knelt to Lily's level, brushing a strand of hair from the child's face. "I would never hide something from you, sweetheart," she said softly. "I know how much this means to you. I would not hurt you like that." Her voice did not shake. She did not look at the other women. Instead, she focused entirely on Lily, holding her gaze until the little girl nodded, still hugging the bear. The calmness unsettled the group. There was no outburst they could mock, no defensive stumble they could exploit. Grace simply walked back to her duties, leaving their trap to hang in the open air. What none of them knew was that Ethan had seen everything. The mansion's hallways and common rooms were equipped with discreet security cameras. He had installed them years ago for safety, but now they revealed truths he would have otherwise missed. From his private study, Ethan watched the playback. Veronica's smirk as she suggested searching Grace's closet, Isabella's swift and suspicious discovery, Claudia's pointed remark, and most of all, Grace's quiet composure under humiliation. He saw the way Lily's trust never wavered. He saw the glances the women exchanged when they thought no one was looking, and he began to realize that this week was not just a search for a stepmother. It was a test of character, and some were failing spectacularly. Outside, the women continued their games, unaware that every calculated cruelty was being documented. Ethan did not yet know exactly how he would address it, but one thing was certain. Grace's strength was becoming impossible to ignore. The evening after the teddy bear incident, Grace sat alone in her small quarters at the far end of the mansion. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. She stared at the faint reflection of herself in the darkened window, weighing her next move. She had faced insults before, but this was different. This time, Lily's happiness was on the line. Grace knew she could not simply endure and hope the cruelty would fade. If the truth was to come out, it needed to be done carefully, without giving the women another chance to twist the story. She reached for her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. Danielle answered on the second ring. "Grace? It is late. Are you all right?" "I am fine," Grace replied, though her voice carried a firmness Danielle had rarely heard from her. "I need your help. You still have friends in the media, do you not?" Danielle hesitated. "I do. Why?" Grace explained briefly. The false accusations, the constant humiliations, and now the teddy bear incident. Danielle's outrage was instant. "They cannot get away with this. Tell me what you need." "I need to collect proof," Grace said. "Not just for me, but so Lily knows who truly cares about her." Danielle promised to connect her with someone who understood how to handle delicate matters without attracting attention too soon. The next morning, Grace also called Professor Harold Grant, her late mother's old friend. He had been a mentor when she was younger, teaching her how to remain calm even when emotions ran high. "You need to be thorough," he advised. "Gather everything: words, actions, patterns. The truth is your best shield, but it must be complete." While Grace built her quiet plan, Ethan was working on his own countermeasure. The footage he had seen replayed in his mind, each smirk and cruel whisper hardening his resolve that he picked up the phone and contacted a trusted acquaintance, Detective Miguel Alvarez. Miguel had worked private cases for wealthy families before, uncovering fraud, hidden debts, and dangerous secrets. "I want a full background check on 5 women," Ethan said plainly. Discretion is everything. I will send you their names. Miguel's response was calm but confident. Consider it done. You will have answers soon. In the days that followed, a silent war began inside the mansion, a war of patience and precision. Grace started keeping a small notebook in her apron pocket, jotting down times, dates, and brief descriptions of incidents. She borrowed a tiny recording device from Danielle's media contact and tucked it in places where the women gathered. Whispered comments about her not being good enough and knowing her place began to stack up like heavy stones in her favor. Ethan, meanwhile, received updates from Miguel. The detective's findings were unsettling. Unpaid debts, questionable business deals, and one case involving a false charity. Ethan stored each report in a locked drawer, the pieces of the puzzle slowly forming a full picture. Lily remained Grace's strongest ally. Even when Evelyn tried to tell her, Grace will not be here forever, dear, Lily would shake her head and say, she is my best friend. At dinner, she sat beside Grace without hesitation. In the garden, she reached for her hand as if nothing else in the world could replace it. One afternoon, Grace overheard Claudia trying to persuade Lily to join her for tea in town without Grace. Lily's reply was simple. If Grace cannot come, I do not want to go. The disappointment on Claudia's face was clear by the end of the week. Grace had hours of recorded evidence and pages of notes. Danielle's media contact assured her that, when the time came, the story would be told fairly and truthfully. Professor Grant reviewed her collection and approved. You have done well, he said. They cannot twist this without exposing themselves. Ethan's own investigation was nearly complete. Miguel hinted that what he had uncovered could ruin reputations in a matter of hours. All that remained was choosing the right moment to act. For now, the house carried on as if nothing was wrong. The women laughed over their wine, planned their outings, and pretended their little jabs had gone unnoticed. But two quiet forces, one of compassion, one of justice, were closing in. The real game had only just begun. The grand hall of Ethan's mansion had not been this full in years. The chandeliers shone brightly, casting golden light over the long polished table. Crystal glasses sparkled, silver cutlery gleamed, and every chair was perfectly placed. Ethan stood near the head of the table, his expression calm but unreadable. He had personally invited each of the 5 women, telling them it was a special closing dinner to celebrate their time together. They had come dressed in their finest gowns, each expecting an evening of praise and attention. What they did not know was that tonight was not about celebration. Tonight was about truth. Guests began to arrive. A few influential members of the community, 2 well-known journalists, and some of Ethan's business partners. Danielle arrived in a tailored navy suit, her confident stride making more than one person turn their head. Professor Grant followed, carrying a leather folder. Detective Miguel Alvarez entered last, dressed in a dark suit, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Grace moved quietly between the tables, helping arrange last-minute details. She wore a simple but elegant dress Lily had picked out for her hair neatly pulled back. She kept her head high, even when the women whispered behind their hands. When everyone was seated, Ethan stood and raised his glass. Thank you all for coming, he began. Tonight, I wanted to share something important. For too long, I have allowed certain matters to remain hidden. That ends now. The women glanced at each other, their smiles stiffening. Ethan nodded toward Miguel. The detective stepped forward and placed a laptop on the table, connecting it to the large screen at the end of the hall. The first video began to play. It showed the women in various rooms of the mansion, the lounge, the garden, the hallway outside Lily's room. Their voices were clear, the insults unmistakable. She does not belong here. We should remind her of her place. Lily will forget her soon enough. Gasps filled the hall. The journalists leaned forward, taking notes. The women's faces shifted from pale shock to defensive anger. This is taken out of context. Evelyn snapped. Miguel ignored her. Let us continue. The next file displayed scanned financial records. These, Miguel said, are transactions linked to fraudulent charity accounts. He pointed to Claudia's name on one document. And here, records showing unpaid debts concealed through false identities. He added, tapping on Monica's profile. One by one, he laid out their histories. failed business ventures hidden from the public, lawsuits quietly settled, donations that never reached their promised causes. Professor Grant then stepped forward with Grace's notebook and recordings. He explained how Grace had been documenting incidents for weeks, showing times, dates, and exact words. Short audio. Clips played. Laughter following a cruel remark. The moment the teddy bear was found in Grace's closet, voices dripping with false concern that why now. The women were squirming in their seats. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. Claudia's hands gripped the edge of the table. Monica's face turned red, and the others stared down at their plates as if the linen napkins could save them. Danielle spoke next. We could have gone straight to the press with this weeks ago. But Grace wanted the truth revealed here, in person, so no one could claim she hid behind headlines. The murmurs in the room grew louder. The journalists were already drafting what would be tomorrow's leading story. Ethan let the silence stretch, then asked, "Does anyone wish to deny what has been shown?" The women exchanged glances, but no one spoke. The weight of the evidence was too heavy. It was then that Lily, sitting beside Grace, stood up. Her small voice cut through the tension. "I do not care what anyone says. Grace has always been there. For me, she is my family. I trust her more than anyone here." The room went completely still. Even the women, so quick to speak before, had no words. Ethan placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "That," he said, "is what matters most. But make no mistake, this house will no longer be a place for cruelty. Each of you will answer for what you have done." Some of the women tried to mutter apologies. Others simply stared down, their pride shattered. The humiliation was complete, and the truth now belonged to everyone in the room. Grace met Danielle's eyes across the table. Neither of them smiled, but both knew this was the moment the balance had shifted. The night that was supposed to be their triumph had become their downfall. The grand hall was still heavy with the echo of Lily's words. Grace sat quietly, unsure. What would happen next? Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with something she had not seen before. Not just gratitude, but deep admiration. That he stepped forward, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. The room fell silent again. "Grace," he began, his voice steady but warm. "You came into our lives when we were lost. You gave Lily a mother's love without ever being asked. You faced cruelty with kindness, lies with truth, and hate with dignity. I cannot imagine our lives without you." Gasps rose from the guests as Ethan opened the box, revealing a delicate diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice carrying through the hall. Grace's eyes widened. For a moment, she was speechless. Then she glanced at Lily, who was already nodding with a huge smile, tears shining in her eyes. Grace looked back at Ethan and whispered, "Yes." The hall erupted into applause. Lily ran into Grace's arms, holding her tight. Ethan joined them, wrapping both in his embrace. It was a picture of unity no one in that room could deny. The 5 women sat frozen, their own plans and pride shattered in the face of this moment. The backlash began almost immediately. The journalists' stories were online by morning. Video clips of the confrontation spread across social media like wildfire. Comments poured in, outrage at the women's cruelty, praise for Grace's dignity. Within days, sponsorship deals and job offers that the women once flaunted were gone. Board memberships were revoked, partnerships ended, and their names became tied to scandal. One lost her position at a luxury brand after customers threatened boycotts. Another faced an investigation into her fake charity. Invitations to high society events stopped arriving. The elegant image they had built for years crumbled in front of the whole world. 2 years later, the Wallace mansion was different. Laughter filled the halls more often. The gardens were alive with children's voices, children whose futures were now brighter because of Grace. Grace stood on the stage of the Wallace Foundation's annual gala, a vision of quiet confidence. As the head of the foundation, she had launched scholarship programs for hundreds of children from underprivileged backgrounds. Many were now in schools and universities they had once only dreamed of. Ethan stood beside her, his proud smile never fading. Lily, now a little taller, helped pass out award certificates to the scholarship recipients, her joy as genuine as her mother's. When Grace spoke, her words were simple. Kindness is not weakness. Dignity is not silence. And the greatest revenge is not in destroying others, but in building a life that they can never touch. The audience rose in a standing ovation. The evening ended with a photograph that would be printed in newspapers and framed in the mansion. Grace in a flowing evening gown, Ethan in his tuxedo, and Lily in a bright dress, all three holding hands. Behind them was a banner that read, Wallace Foundation, building futures with love. The smiles on their faces told a story far louder than the scandals of the past. Grace had not only won respect, she had built a life filled with dignity, love, and success. And that, more than anything, was her true victory.